Welcome to the first in the Pocket Prescription series, a short note for people who want to look after their health without getting embroiled in the noise. This week, what is it to be healthy? When we say we want to be healthy, what do we really mean? Can you see health? Can you feel it? Is it something that lasts or something fleeting? Because most of us do carry around a picture of health in our heads. It's quite visual. It often involves a body that's lean and youthful and energetic and often smiling and maybe even half dressed, and almost certainly with that image trying to sell you something. But appearance is a very unreliable marker of health. You can look healthy while being underfueled, you can look healthy while being anxious, exhausted or injured, and you can look healthy whilst quietly burning out on the inside. So if health can be edited or filtered or staged, then it probably isn't the right definition. So maybe health is more about how you feel, but that's slippery too, isn't it? Because feelings change with sleep, stress, hormones, workload, life. You can feel flat and still be healthy. You can feel energised while running entirely on adrenaline, and you can feel fine right up until something gives way. So health isn't really a feeling either, is it? So it brings us to something more useful. Health isn't a peak state. It isn't a transformation. It isn't just a good week. Health has to be something that endures. It's what remains available to you when life applies pressure. Can you recover when routines break? Can you tolerate discomfort without falling apart? Can you adapt rather than stop? In my job as a doctor, we are very good at defining disease, but we're pretty rubbish at defining health, if I'm honest. You can be disease-free and still be very fragile. You can have normal blood tests and have very little reserves. And you can be medically cleared of everything and still feel unable to cope or feel dreadful. So health isn't really about the absence of something going wrong. It's got to be more about the presence of capacity. And there's another thing that makes this hard to pin down: age. Most of us quietly change our definition of health across the decades, whether we recognise it or admit it or not. Earlier in life, health often means performance, how fast you recover, what your body can do, how it looks. But later on in life, health tends to mean something else entirely. Staying independent, staying mobile, staying mentally sharp and intact, and not becoming frail and medically fragile. That shift isn't usually philosophical, it's experiential. It happens when someone we know gets ill or injured or older, or you're recovering from illness yourself and you feel like, Jesus, I've aged. This is explored really well in The 7 Ages of Death by Dr. Richard Shepherd. Shepherd spent decades as a forensic pathologist, and what he does in that book is simply observe patterns, not theories, not lifestyle advice, just what actually ends lives at different stages. And one of the striking things he describes is this: outside of the first year of life, where it's usually something congenital that will account for death if it happens so early on, much of early adulthood is dominated by cause of death being caused by trauma, risk-taking behaviour such as alcohol or drugs or violence or suicide. Disease barely gets a look in, which is clarifying because it reminds us that health has never been a guarantee against life happening to us. As people move into their 40s and 50s, disease starts to enter the picture, but it's pretty uneven at that stage. We do see cancers, we see alcohol-related disease starting to set in, the beginning sometimes of cardiovascular disease, and sudden deaths do happen. Often people who looked fine suddenly aren't. But then from the 60s onwards, there is a shift. Health starts to matter enormously, not just for survival, but for how life is lived. Now we're talking about cardiovascular disease on a much bigger scale, and neurodegenerative disease, frailty, falls can happen, and some of the complications of long-term illnesses. And here's the key point: the same diagnosis can produce wildly different lives depending on your prior health, strength, fitness, and resilience. And this is where I have to credit the fantastic work of Sir Muir Gray. In his book, Sod Sitting, Get Moving, he makes a quietly radical argument that ageing itself should not meaningfully impair function until very late in life. And he says into your 90s, and he quotes Sir David Attenborough and our late Queen as perfect examples of this. Before that, unless disease creeps in, often deconditioning will be the biggest cause for ageing. That and an ageing mindset. He is very clear that much of what we label as ageing is loss of strength, loss of balance, loss of aerobic capacity, not inevitability. Interesting, food for thought. So when you put Richard Shepherd and Muir Gray's work together, a very clear picture emerges. Early life is dominated by chance and behaviour. Midlife is where exposure starts to cash out. And later life is where health dominates quality, independence and margin. Not immortality, not avoidance of death, but how well you live before it arrives. And this brings us back to the mind-body divide, which frankly doesn't really exist. I heard Arthur Brooks say this week that psychology is biology, and he's right. Your thoughts change your physiology. Stress is not abstract. Anxiety isn't just mental. Movement improves mood because your mind and your body are one system. You cannot have a healthy body living in a chronically dysregulated mind, and you can't think your way out of a neglected body either. So when we talk about health, a more honest and better working definition might be this. I'd see health as the ability to meet the demands of life with enough physical and mental capacity to be able to adapt and recover and continue. Not perfectly, not happily all of the time, but sustainably, which matters because a lot of people are quietly judging themselves against the wrong standard. They think they are failing because they don't look a certain way, or because they don't feel amazing all the time, or because things feel harder than what they used to, when actually nothing is wrong. They're just living real lives in real bodies across time. So perhaps instead of asking, do I look healthy or do I feel great, maybe a better question might be, is what I'm doing building something that lasts? Because health isn't a look that you can achieve, and it's not a feeling that you can chase. It's more of a relationship that you can maintain. And you don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to stay in it. You just have to be good enough.